I don't think Mount Rushmore is lying. I think the story around it is because this doesn't look like a mountain. It looks like something and carefully rewritten. 10 years, Dynamite. That story only works, and once you do, you realize the problem isn't how it was built. It's why the question. I used to think Mount Rushmore was just Mount Rushmore, a place you drive to, you stop, you look, you leave. Not something you sit with, not something you question. And maybe that's the point. You're given the story once, clean, efficient. 4 faces, 10 years, dynamite, hand tools, end of discussion. There's no space in that story for hesitation. No room for, that doesn't feel right. I didn't notice that until I stopped looking at it as a monument. I just stood there longer, not thinking about presidents, not thinking about history, just thinking about time and stone. And that's when it happened. Not a theory, not a conclusion, just a quiet feeling. This isn't the kind of thing you're supposed to ask questions about. So I stopped listening to the story and went looking for the numbers. Mount Rushmore was worked on from 1927 to 1941. About 14 years depending on how you count the pauses. Roughly 400 workers passed through the project. Not all at once, not all doing the same job. Each face is about 60 feet tall. 6 stories, vertical, cut into solid granite. By the end, about 450,000 tons of rock had been removed. That's not a rumor, that's the official number. And granite matters here. This isn't soft stone, it doesn't carve politely. Granite resists, it fractures, and when it fails suddenly. The primary method was drilling and dynamite. Drill, pack, blast. After that, honeycombing, many small holes close together so sections could be broken off by hand. That part is supposed to explain the precision. But every hole takes time. Every blast risks cracking what you meant to keep. And when time is tight, finishing always suffers. Corners get cut. Details simplify. That's not an accusation. That's just how work behaves. And yet, what we're looking at doesn't look rushed, which leaves you in an awkward place. Either this was one of the most precisely executed stone projects ever done in that window, or the timeline isn't telling the whole story. Dynamite is very good at one thing: making material disappear. It doesn't sculpt, it doesn't refine, it removes. And yet, we're told it was the primary tool here. On paper that sounds fine, but paper doesn't have eyes. Faces do. Eyes are unforgiving, a fraction too deep and the expression collapses, a few inches off and the face goes dead. There is no margin for error there. Look at the eyes on Mount Rushmore, not as presidents, just as eyes. They're balanced, aligned, they hold expression depending on the light. That's not what almost looks like, that's finished. So if the most delicate work was done by hand, where is the record of that work? There are hundreds of photos, men drilling, men hanging on cables, men watching blasts, but not men shaping eyelids, not men correcting expressions. And finishing is where skill lives, it's where mistakes happen, and where history usually leaves a trail. Here, the faces appear without visible struggle, so the question isn't, did they use dynamite? We know they did. The question is quieter: how much was created? And how much was revealed? People point to the photographs, and there are a lot of them. Drills, cables, explosions. At first glance it looks convincing, but look closer. What the photos show is removal. rock being blasted away. What they don't show is creation. No eyelids being shaped, no expressions being softened. The record jumps from rough stone to finished faces, no visible struggle in between. And when a historical record skips the most delicate stage, you're left wondering whether that stage ever looked the way we imagine it did. Granite doesn't hide work, it records it. Every drill slips a little, every chisel hesitates, hard stone keeps those mistakes. But these surfaces, they're clean, too clean. Not polished, not raw, uniform. No hesitation marks, no reworking. That's strange, because rushed handwork always leaves a mess. Here, the stone feels more resolved than worked, as if the shape was already there, and the job was simply to uncover it. Jefferson was originally carved on the other side of Washington. They started it, committed to it. Then, Iadzazi, they decided the stone wasn't good enough, so they blew it up, not adjusted, destroyed. And started again on the opposite side. Pause there. This project is supposed to be racing time, and yet it had room to erase months of work. That's not how time pressure behaves. You don't destroy finished work unless time isn't actually the enemy. Right in the middle of all this, they cut a tunnel, a 70-foot tunnel blasted into the mountain, the Hall of Records, documents, messages for the future. A philosophical side project. Think about that. A job supposedly fighting the clock doesn't add complexity unless it has room to breathe. When the hall was stopped, it wasn't the mountain. It was oversight, which suggests something uncomfortable. Time wasn't the real limit, someone watching was. This was the Great Depression. Banks failed, people lost homes, men waited in food lines. If you lived through it, or grew up hearing about it, you know, money slowed everything down. Except here, Rushmore kept going, crews stayed, explosives kept coming. Enough to relocate a face, enough to carve a tunnel. It didn't mean the depression didn't exist here. It meant it didn't apply equally. So the question is simple. If the country was short on money, who wasn't? The same hand appears again. Gutzon Borglum, Stone Mountain, Georgia, even larger scale, same medium, same confidence. One monument can be explained away. 2. Start to look like a pattern, and patterns don't ask if something was possible. They ask, what kind of process makes this look routine? At a certain point, you stop trying to solve it. You stop lining up explanations, stop arguing with strangers in your head, because the question changes. It's no longer, how did they do this? It becomes, what did they actually begin with? What if this wasn't a blank mountain waiting for an idea? What if the hard part, the part that breaks tools, costs time, and leaves scars, had already happened long before anyone showed up with a plan? That doesn't require a villain. It doesn't require a secret group or a hidden hand. It only requires that history behaves the same way people do. You clean things up, you simplify, you tell the version that's easiest to pass on, until eventually, the story feels older than the work itself. Mount Rushmore doesn't confirm any of this. It doesn't deny it either. It just sits there, finished, undisturbed, and quiet. And maybe that's the point. Not to give you answers, but to see who's willing to stay with the question after the story runs out.